So I'm just going to start by giving you just sort of a little bit of history and sort of how we came to the RFP that we released last week. Then Cynthia is going to take a little bit of time to just walk you through sort of the logistics of working with our system, our grant system, and some of the logistics about what you might need to know and take questions around that. And then I'll spend a little bit of time actually showing you the application and kind of pointing out a couple of things that we want to make sure that we lift up for you, and then give time for questions. So with that, my understanding is that we have been funding, it may have been for longer, but I am aware of at least 18 years at the Hartford Foundation of a significant investment into the community for summer programming. I am not sure, I'm fairly sure that for most of those 18 years, it has been by invitation only. So meaning that there has been a pool of grantees that started, and then over time, maybe occasionally if there were additional dollars for the fund, funds available, we might have added a couple of additional programs and partners and grantees, but it for the most part has just been working with this cohort, providing 2 times a year some professional learning and networking opportunities, and really the focus has been, I think at least in the last decade, when Judy McBride, who is our director here at the foundation, and she was working with the summer grant program, she really focused on literacy, because about 10 years ago the campaign for grade level reading took off, and we really wanted to support that, and I know a lot of you are working on positive youth development and a lot of really important skills that are so valued and necessary for our young people. So we just want to acknowledge all of that and all of that history and all of the amazing work that you're doing. And by our pivoting, we're not trying to say that, that anything wasn't working. It's not that. It really was, okay, so we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of social unrest. We're in the middle of this crazy United States of America. So what are we doing with summer grant making next summer? This is sort of an opportunity. This is what we thought. We've been kind of going along in the same way with literally almost the same application for all this time. And we thought this is probably, if we're going to make a change, this is probably a good year to do it, especially given how much pivoting had to happen this last summer with programming, with either not being able to run, changing to virtual, changing timelines, all the different challenges that all of you underwent. So we thought this was a good time to shift and really think about summer 2021 almost as a standalone and a learning opportunity for the foundation. Like, what I mean by that is that we decided to do this request for proposals and make it sort of like its own opportunity, and then we'll learn from how it went, and what's going on with all of you and what's going on in the world, as to how we think maybe the summer program at the foundation should look going forward, whether it should regularly be an RFP and just an open door kind of situation, or whether we want to go back to building sort of an invitation cohort. So that's sort of where we are. I'm just going to pause right there to see if anyone has any comments or questions on that thinking. So you can tell I was a teacher at one point because I believe in the 30-second wait time.
I have a question.
See?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
All right. So I was out getting that coffee that someone suggested that I get. And I came in and you had already begun. So am I right in thinking that you are encouraging camp to be more outside as opposed to inside, more physical than academic, or just how, what are you saying? Because this is very important. I heard you say something about a shift and a pivot, and this camp 2021 would be a standalone type of thing. So I'm just trying to figure out, I do know that for our camp, we did a half academic, and then the other half was physical or artistic or whatever. So I'm sorry, I do apologize for having missed.
No, it's all good. I encouraged you to go get that coffee, so that's all on me. Yeah. So actually, Clara, what I was talking about was the shift from how we had really been sort of an invitation only cohort, really focused
Oh,
on literacy. There was that big literacy component,
yes,
as
yes,
positive youth development. Just saying that this summer we're going to kind of look at things a little different. I hadn't even gotten into sort of what the criteria were for this summer grant yet, so you haven't missed that. I'm actually going to kind of start talking about that after Cynthia goes through logistics. I'm going to kind of take you through the application process, but just really high level to speak to what you're saying. I would say yes, we are very interested. We did have a meeting with the summer grantees from 2020 in the fall and floated the idea of prioritizing in-person camp when it was safe and possible. And that seemed to be positively received, and people seem to understand why young people and families need that and want that, and that there was also an interest in getting young people up and active, so we did
yes.
want to support that with our application process. And in no way, though, it isn't necessarily lifted in the application, and we'll look at it in a few minutes. The academic piece, in no way are we saying that we don't think that the academic piece is important. I think this is a really good point. Thank you, Clara, for bringing it up. It's just that this particular summer, because of all of the circumstances and everything that we have to look at, we are lifting up some other things. I mean, and yet at the same time, I know the reviewers will be like, "Oh, look, there is this literacy component, and that's an important plus to the program." So if you are an academic centered or have academic components, I think you should still talk about them, even if it maybe isn't kind of called out in the application when we go through it. So I'm just going to kind of pause it there. And if there's more questions around those pieces when we get to the application, there'll definitely be time for that. Okay. So with that, I just wanted to tell you last week, you probably know this, but last Wednesday we released the request for proposals. We have about $820,000 total to put out into the community. We are targeting Hartford youth with that funding, and then also people with disabilities. So not just youth. And the people with disabilities don't have to be just from Hartford. You could have a camp that serves any one of our 29 towns when talking about either students or adults with disabilities. But our main focus for the traditional sort of summer programming is going to be the Hartford area youth. So with that, and I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia and let her kind of walk you through some of the logistics, and then we'll spend the last part of our time together talking about the application itself.
All right, so I'm showing everyone where the summer request for proposals lives on our website. I can share this link in the chat afterwards. I just wanted to make sure everyone was able to access not only the application, but also all of the information related to the request. So there's some background information that Jackie just shared, but then there's also the clear proposal requirements. This information is not it's not all within the application, so it's important that everyone reads through this before they actually start working on the application. That way they have all of the clear requirements in mind as they're completing all of the questions. So there is a priority this year for camps that are running in person safely. So we are interested in learning about camps that are able to run in person, but we also understand that there may be contingency plans. So we ask that camps include both of those options. If you are thinking you might have to do virtual, or, obviously there are a lot of unknowns, we ask that you respond to the question with different scenarios. And then also organizations that incorporate active and encourage outdoor and physical activity. We would like, definitely to see youth outdoors more so than in front of computers like they have been. So we definitely encourage that. And we ask that if you are, there's actually some clear questions that Jackie will show you in a little bit that ask what those activities are. And there's also an emphasis on cultural competency. And there's going to be a question in the application asking, how is your organization meeting cultural competency, whether that is through staff or through your programming. So that will be in the application as well. And there is a priority given to organizations that are Black or Latino led. This is because the foundation is committed to equity throughout the community. So we want to make sure that we lift that up in this application. Then there's also the target population. The types of programs have not really changed. We still fund camperships, enrichment programs, tutorial and counselor and training programs. But unlike previous years when each program was supposed to complete one separate application, we're asking for organizations to complete a request that includes all of their programming. So if you are an organization that does camperships and CITs, you should only do one application rather than two applications, which you may have done in the past. So that is one of the clear changes that has occurred since the previous application years. So we want to make sure that you're all aware of that, and that is listed in the application itself. So you'll be able to recognize that there as well. So I think that's all I had to really clarify, but we want to make sure that you have access to this document so that you can read through all of these requirements and keep them in mind as you are completing the application. The other thing is when you are actually ready to start the application, if you are a new organization, you could easily register to get a login. But if you are an existing organization to the foundation, that is, you've received a grant in the past, we ask that you either use your current login, that is, if you have a login that you've used to access your grants through this portal, use that same login, or email our grants administration and they can provide a login for your organization. Because if you create a new login and you already have a profile for your organization, you may be duplicating items, and we would like to have all of the applications for each organization linked together. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. And there are instructions when you go into the portal, when you click on that online application, it'll take you here where you'll be able to see, you know, if you're a new user or existing users, it's going to clarify what you should do there. So let me know if you have any questions in terms of accessing the application. Or any questions about the requirements as well.
Cynthia, this is Maureen from Hark. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Quick question. When you said targeting Hartford youth and people with disabilities, do you mean they can be older than youth then? They can be adults?
Yes.
If we have a summer camp for adults with people with disabilities. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, you could always feel free to put them in the chat and I could answer them as we move along.
All right, so I guess we are going to move along to the application itself. So I'm going to share my screen here and pull it up. So we have here, this is a PDF, but what when you go into the portal, like one question, you know, the questions will come up sort of one at a time and you'll have to answer it to move on. But I just wanted you to be able to see sort of what to expect. So this is the overview at the top of it with the deadline and contact info if you have questions. You would start out by putting your agency information. You only need to identify a fiscal sponsor if your organization is not an active 501c3. We can only issue grants to 501c3s, but if you're a program and not actually a 501c3, a nonprofit, you can work with a nonprofit to be a fiscal agent to receive grant funding. So that's what this question is about. So you just click no if you're a 501c3, and if you click yes, then they'll ask you some additional questions about your fiscal sponsor. So then this is your annual operating budget. So this doesn't mean just summer. So if you are a year-round agency, this question is asking about that, you know, your annual budget for the year-round. If you're just a summer program or a summer, you know, that's what you do, then whatever your full budget is, you would put that dollar amount there. You complete a demographic data sheet that is supplied with the application. And then, like Cynthia mentioned, we are going to ask if your organization is Black or Latino led. And this is a new question that we are asking. The foundation is committed to dismantling systemic racism, reducing disparities around race, place, and income. And so we want to lift up agencies and acknowledge agencies that have placed leaders of color in the executive director level position. That's sort of what we're talking about. That doesn't mean that we are not acknowledging organizations that hire a staff that is richly diverse. When we get to the cultural competency question, that's where you can articulate that, yes, even though maybe you're a white-led organization, you have consciously thought about the population that you're serving, and you're hiring as much staff, diverse staff as you can. So there's another place to talk about that. This is just really saying, we really want to acknowledge organizations that are putting Black and Latino leaders in the highest level positions. So that's what this question is about. And then you'll have a racial ethnic pull down, which seems kind of strange after you've just answered the other question. It's a standard question that's tied to all of our applications. So that's why it's a follow-up to the other one. Here, if you say yes, you are needing a fiscal sponsor, you will see these questions. Otherwise, you will not. Just asking about who your fiscal sponsor is. Then we get to project information. So location. And I know this has come up in a couple of conversations I've had with some potential grantees that you work potentially with Hartford Public Schools, for example, and you run your program in a school. And last summer, there was a challenge and an issue with that because of COVID-19. We're not able to do so. So we realize you may have some similar uncertainty for this summer. I think we could put your best guess. You have 1,000 character limit, so you could describe and say, historically, we've worked with Hartford Public Schools and had our programs in the schools. That's what our plan to do is this summer, if that can come forward. If you have alternatives, you can talk about that. To your best guess. We realize that this is January and there's 6 months and we've only rolled out the first tier of a vaccine and we don't know what we don't know. So this is really your best guess, where you think your programming might be happening. The next question is about the summer directory. If you have been a grantee with us in the past, you're aware then for quite a number of years, we actually had a published, really beautiful paper directory that last year, the last year and a half, we actually worked towards moving online. And there were a lot of reasons for that. Part of it was to save a lot of trees. But even more importantly, programming was having date changes, location changes, and the online directory allows for, last minute. Thank you, Cynthia. She just plopped the directory in the chat so you can check it out, what it looked like last year. And, I think it's a really great resource for parents. And we also, when they built it, Connecticut After School Network is hosting it. And when they built it, they made it friendly for phones and for app use. So you might want to check it out. And basically, if you're just clicking yes here, this just means that we can release your information that you have applied for a summer grant. So you're running a summer programming, and then they can assure that they have you in their directory. So, and if you don't want to be, you can click no, and we won't share anything. And then the next sharing question is actually an internal sharing question. We have what's called donor advised funds. So we have donors at the foundation who have given us funding unrestricted, basically, and said, we're going to trust your board policy and your staff to make the best possible decisions to put the funding out to the community. And that $820,000 that we have collectively for this RFP is unrestricted, really. It's sort of falling in our unrestricted area. But we also have additional funds in these donor advised funds. And some donors are interested in either summer programs or specifically youth programs that might connect to something that your particular program does. That might be science, or might be arts, or might be horses, or whatever it is. So historically, donors have had to kind of do a little digging and maybe have grantees do an additional application. So we just said, let's just ask our grantees if it's okay if we just share their information with with potential donors, then they wouldn't have to fill out anything additional. So, and if you feel like, I'd rather know if someone is looking into me, then you can click no here. But, if you think, yeah, I don't mind if donors are considering our program, then go ahead and click yes here. Types of programs, Cynthia talked about this in her opening. We traditionally had campership, counselor in training, tutorial and enrichment categories. And we underlined enrichment here, the definition being programs that provide additional learning opportunities to multiple summer programs funded by the foundation. So that basically an enrichment program is one that doesn't host youth or adults themselves. It's more like you're offering a program to other organizations that are hosting camps or programs, and then you're providing this enriching activity. So like, for example, the Connecticut Science Center is a great example of a grantee who could receive a certain number of dollars for a certain number of, and basically then they could say, we have this many free tickets for the grantees in the Hartford Foundation pool. And we do that with several different organizations. So that's what enrichment is. And a reminder to what Cynthia said is that instead of having, those grantees, and we had about 15 or more of them that would fill out 2 applications, because you might have 2 of these categories. And instead of having to do 2 applications and 2 final reports, we're synthesizing that. So you can ask for a larger dollar amount because you're asking to do both of your programs in 1 application, but we're going to have you do 1 final report and have you talk about both programs in the same application. So that's why you can choose as many as you need to here. And then you can provide the name of your summer program. And if there's if you're doing 2, there's a character limit of 250. So I think you could fit probably both titles in there, maybe with a dash or a slash between them, however you want to do that. And then here's your project description with a character limit of 3,000. So you have a lot of space to talk about your program. And here, mentioning that this is our North Star right now, that we're thinking of planning to do this in-person thing, but you can mention like a scenario B where, if there are restrictions and you need to go hybrid, or, if your first way, I actually know in our info session last week, there is an organization that's already planning 100% virtual, just because that's where their comfort level is and where their ability is. So whatever it is for you, and here is, there's going to be a question coming up more specific to the modifications you're making because of the pandemic and COVID-19. So the focus here is really on the content. So to Claire's point in the beginning, if you're doing an academic piece, you might want to talk about it here. If you're adding in an arts piece, this is a great place to talk about it here as well. So this is your project description. Then we're going to get to some of the questions that are frankly aligning to some of our outcomes at the foundation right now. So one of our important outcomes that we're looking at is our employment opportunities. And we connected the summer programming because we see summer programming as enriching daycare for young people that help and support working families. So we're asking this question: does your program provide enriching daycare to serve working families? And then if you say yes, you say in what ways. So maybe your program is a particularly full day program. Maybe you run 8 to 5. And so you have this added thing that, maybe you're serving young people and giving parents longer daycare time because that's your program. Maybe you want to talk about the enriching piece. Maybe your program is partnering with summer school. And, they do summer school in the morning, and your program provides some enriching daycare for working families in the afternoon because it gives a place for the young people to go after their experience with summer school. Then there's a question about Hartford youth opportunities. So does the program provide Hartford youth with employment opportunities and career exposure through CIT programs and otherwise? So again, this is connecting back to our employment area, thinking about career exposure and maybe, and those employment opportunities, the career, the counselors in training are really kind of, beginning level jobs for our young people. But also I know many of your programs historically have had great career exposure, either lessons, curriculum, enrichment activities. So this is your chance to kind of talk about some of those and lift those up in what ways question here. Then there's the cultural competence question. Does your program demonstrate cultural competence? And then in what ways? And so this is a great opportunity to either talk about staffing, maybe talking about your curriculum, maybe talking about training that your team has gone through, and whatever, however that resonates for you and whatever steps that your organization or program has taken around that. And then we're lifting the physical and outdoor activities, knowing that we've all been rather sedentary. I'm grateful now for my standing desk, which I got a few months ago, because I found myself just sitting so much. So we're just wanting to, knowing the last 2020 and this part of 2021, really wanting to encourage physical and outdoor activities, as is, if it is safe. Of course, we're always like sort of couching it up with that cover. So this is like, are you planning on some of those? If so, what do those look like for you? And if you're planning a totally virtual program, how are you thinking about incorporating some outdoor activities? I've heard some really creative things from some of the virtual programs that have run. And then here's project updates. So this is really where you can spend some time talking about what you're doing to adapt to COVID-19 safety regulations. I know some organizations have articulated that they might have some additional odd expenses that they've never had before, some things that they have to do in order to be safety ready. So this is a great place to talk about that, to talk about, how you plan to prepare your young people. Maybe if you need to have more staff, this is a place to talk about, because in order to meet, the number of young people per adult, we're going to have more adults. So, this is where some of our expenses are going to go up. So this is an opportunity to just talk about what's going to be different this summer. What updates do you have about your program because of our COVID-19 safety regulations? And the project track record is really, is just wondering, how long has your program been around? Is this your first year out of the gate, second year? Have you been 20 years? Just to get a sense of, the history of your program. And then this is the total number of participants projected. So we know you don't know. Hopefully, historically, you have some sense maybe before last summer and then even last summer, sort of what to expect. So we're just kind of asking you to make a guess. How many do you think? Or maybe what's your capacity based on the current regulations that you think you'll be able to meet? And then there's a question about anticipated households with working parents or caregivers needing child care services. Complicated worded question. So it's just saying anticipated number of households that are served. So that's sort of saying, say you have 35 youth in your program and 5 of them are siblings. So basically 30 of your kids are individual, and then those extra 5 are related to 5 others in your 30. So what this question would be is, say, 30 households. So we're serving 30 households, even though there's 35 kids, because we know, in some cases, the siblings join them for programming. And then this is the total participants supported through foundation funding. So this is where we're looking at the Hartford youth that you're anticipating. So this is where you would put actually 35 kids. So 35 bodies, again, projected, realizing that these are all projected numbers. And then here's where we're just asking about the age range of participants that you are hoping to work with this summer, and a little bit about your recruitment. I know that came up as a topic that it's a hot button from what I've heard, that a lot of agencies, especially after this last year, like, what does recruitment look like? Our family's going to be ready. So we're actually kind of gathering this more just to figure out, is there something else that the Hartford Foundation can do to support you with the recruitment? And then we come into the budget part. So your total project budget. So that means, like, for the summer, like, what does it cost for you to run your summer programming? And then your amount requested. And we're capping the request amounts at $45,000. So that would be total. So if you have 2 different programs, you would combine them together and make a request for up to $45,000. And the grants that will be awarded are going to be based on the numbers served, the number of staff, and the full cost to run the program. And we know some of those things are going to vary because of COVID. But that's sort of how we're going to look at. It's not like every organization that comes in is going to get $45,000, because then the money would be gone relatively quickly, and there would not be probably that many programs. So we are kind of thinking a little bit more holistically about the amounts that we're able to grant. There'll be an opportunity for a budget narrative. So if you have something called supplies, that actually has say it's $8,000 worth of supplies, and you just put supplies in your budget, and you don't actually articulate what those supplies are, the readers may be looking at this saying, ooh, that's a lot of money for supplies. So here's a chance for you to say, these supplies are PPE, or these supplies are, necessary software for our computers so that we can run the hybrid program that we're anticipating to run. Or these are, you know, outdoor equipment that we need because we've never done an outdoor program like to this level before. So I think it's, so the narrative is your friend, is a chance to kind of unpack and talk about the different components of the budget form, which I'll show you in a moment. But I want to use this particular moment to say that another difference this summer that we've never done before, and we're really excited about engaging this in this way, is we're involving community in the decision-making process. So what we mean by that is that we've actually, we are going to stipend some caregivers, parents, guardians, family members to be readers. We're going to put them through a little bit of a training, especially this. We're reaching out to find parent leaders in both Hartford and some surrounding Alliance District towns that we have relationships with, and we're going to ask them to be reviewers, along with some of the staff internally, to make decisions around, you know, who and how much funding. You know, and also to learn from them, like, what about these programs? Like, what made you score this program in this way? I mean, we're going to give them rubrics, but I think it will help us understand what parents want, what families are looking for in programs, and in terms of how they're scoring. So this budget narrative will be really important for, in particular, people from the community that may not be used to reading grants and may not know what indirect costs are. Like, we know, like Cynthia and I would be like, oh yeah, we know that seems reasonable. But, you know, a parent may be reading it on the outside and be like, I don't know what that is. I think this grant, they're asking for too much money. So I'm just sort of letting you know that we are involving the community in this process. So, you know, being as clear as you can would be really helpful. So I see, I'm just going to pull up this question from Michelle. She has a question about the budget narrative. If we've typically applied for campership money, can we also apply a portion of our award to PPE if we apply that way? I'm going to answer yes, and two things that I want you to know. One is that we did make a grant to the Connecticut After School Network in December of 2020 for specifically working with the city of Hartford, the fire chief, Chief Freeman, who's amazing, to purchase in bulk PPE for summer providers. So if you have not received an email from the Connecticut After School Network asking you to fill out a survey to see if you're interested in receiving PPE for the summer, please, after this, let Cynthia or I know, and we will make sure that you receive that email. They will probably do a second round at some point because they're going to make a big bulk purchase and they'll have stuff left. But so that's an avenue for PPE right away, if that's of interest. And the other thing is, you could also consider, I'm not sure what your needs are, but we do have a COVID-19 fund that, if you have questions about, Cynthia actually sits on that team, where we have provided grants to support like reopening costs for nonprofits. And, you know, and that could include PPE, but it might also include technology in some cases. There's been a lot of different sort of interesting requests that have come in that avenue. So I'm just sort of giving you all of the avenues, but yes, you can also put some of that into your budget here as well. So I just wanted to kind of give you all of those options. And I'm going to now share, I'm going to switch and share the budget form. Because if you have been a summer grantee in the past, we had kind of a different form. We've gone with a much simpler, much more streamlined budget form. So we're just asking you to include line items, listing staff positions, and if you have questions, that you can contact me as you're completing this. So this is the budget form. So you put in, you get to name what your project line item is, and as much of a description as you want to put here, but you can also use that budget narrative question. Source of funds, this is because we like to see, you know, that we don't want to be the sole funder of a program. You know, the only way that the program is actually going to run is if the foundation is funding it. So we like to see that there might be some sustainability there. So it could be through tuition that you might have, or it could be some other grants that either you've already gotten committed or that you're anticipating getting, and then articulating the dollar amount and then how much of the funds were covering that specific line item. And then we would see the total project costs and the project totals at the bottom. So it's a very simplified form. And if you have questions when you're filling it out, you can reach out to either one of us. We're almost to the end here. And then I'll open up for some questions. I think, oops, not this one here. So then there's a section, let me just see if this question sorry, there's a question coming up. Does the total cost of camp include insurance? I would say yes. If you have, like, if you fill out your tax form at the end of the year, and you include all of those insurance, liability, and all of that in the expenses to run your organization, then I think yes, that's what you want to put in the cost to run the project and the program. So then there's a sort of branching question. If you've said you're going to run either a campership, tutorial, or CIT program, and you would select all that applies for program fees. So maybe someone asked last week, say I run a campership that is actually free, or no, I run a CIT program that is free because the young people receive a stipend for it, but that I charge $100 or something for campership. You could actually click both of those. And this is sort of we've discovered a flaw in this particular question, that you can't necessarily articulate which one is for which, but just so we get a sense of what you're charging overall for your programming. Okay, so then foundation support of affordability. So this is actually just asking you, have you thought about parents that might not be able to afford it? Like, what are you doing? We know in a lot of cases you guys are thinking about that. So we're just curious, are you providing free camperships or reduced prices? How are you thinking about that, and what are you doing in that field? And then this is geographical area. So you may serve only Hartford, or you may serve a number of our towns. So this is just where you can indicate which towns, even if we're funding only your Hartford participants, we're just curious what towns you serve overall. And then here's a chance, total number of Hartford participants projected. And then a total participants, which would mean from all 29 towns. So say your program is in Manchester for 100 girls or something, and you bring in 20 from Hartford. So you would put 20 for total Hartford participants, and then 100 for the total participants from Greater Hartford. And then this is a question here about total participants with a disability. And then we have a participant profile, just sort of asking what your criteria are and how you identify them, what you're doing around parent engagement, if there's something happening with that. And just a question, if you're working with the school district. I have had some folks ask me if Hartford Public Schools is partnering with us in the way that we have historically, and they are. They are, interested in still listening to your questions, and as quickly as they can. And sometimes, unfortunately, they are navigating a lot of challenges, as all of us are in these times, and may not be able to give you an answer right away, but they are open and they are there as a partner for you in this process. And then there's a question about which Hartford neighborhoods that you tend to pull from. And then this is really important. This is the contact person. So sometimes Cynthia has an important communication for like the executive director level or the development grant writer person. And sometimes it's really targeted for people on the ground that are doing the work. Like maybe there's a great training that we weren't expecting to have that's just been able to turn up. We've been able to fund it, and we just want to put it out there. So this is an opportunity to have whoever you think on the ground is the best contact person for Cynthia to have on file. And then a little bit about your session length and the start and end date. Again, knowing that start and end dates are fluid. Hours of operation, and are you planning to run overnight? Length of session. And this is like, if you're running all summer, do they have to come to all summer, or can they come like a week at a time? And special sessions is just if you've selected that earlier, just sort of describing what does a special session mean in your language. And then here's the enrichment question that obviously if you're an enrichment grantee, in project description, you talk about what you would do when you go, when the young people come to you or you go to them. But here you're talking specifically about materials and other activities that the programs would receive maybe prior to the experience and or after. So it's sort of extending the learning, that it's sort of a chance to talk a little bit about that. And then here's some CIT questions that you will only get if you've clicked that you're running a CIT program. It's really just trying to understand, are you paying them? How much are you paying them? What's the frequency of that? What does the training and supervision look like for that? And then just a chance to talk about your personnel and your staff and how you've trained them, and are you accredited? Are you affiliated with the licensure from OEC? How does your staff, how are they aware of health and safety procedures? And then there's an opportunity to upload a sample program schedule, again, sample, knowing it's, things may change. And any other documentation, I mean, maybe you even have something from a prior year, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but just helps kind of give a picture of the programming or of the impact of the programming, whatever you think is beneficial. And then this is just the formal acknowledgement signatures where the executive director needs to sign, and then the board chair. And just to put it out there, I think it is somewhere in the links that Cynthia first provided. We have had for a number of years a board diversity policy. So you are required to meet board diversity in order to apply for this. And there's some more details about that, I think, as part of the application process as you're filling things out. So I know there was at least one question. Are all providers required to take the vaccine? That is an awesome question, Clara, and not a question anyone has asked me of yet. And I want to put that out there. I would say, I think it would be a lovely, important, and good goal to have all providers having taken the vaccine. But I guess I'm just curious, what's your sense being out in the field? Is that a reasonable goal? Anyone have any thoughts on that in terms of the vaccine? Has anyone been thinking about that?
This is Erica Fern with the 4-H Education Center at our farm. I don't think we can legally require our staff to take the vaccine, but we will definitely be encouraging them. We also had a policy about travel for summer camp staff and some restrictions on their personal travel that we asked them to adhere to. And from what I understand, even if we're all vaccinated with the 2 vaccines, we will still need to wear masks to protect those that are not vaccinated. And not everyone's going to be vaccinated. So I see another summer into fall with all of us wearing masks again and social distancing.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think in terms of the foundation, we're responding to you. Like we also want everyone to be safe, but understand that you can't require particular things. But I think it's nice to know that maybe you're encouraging, your staff, like hearing that kind of language, maybe in your description of how you're handling, COVID-19. And I want to acknowledge Carrie and Tina. Well, Carrie put a question and Tina put a comment in the chat. So Carrie was talking about nurses and that they can take up most of the budget, making accessibility challenging. I'm curious how to account for that challenge in a projected budget. So this is new territory for us. We are aware that what it is going to cost per student this summer is not what it has been costing per student for the last 18 years. And we're open. I mean, every program is different sizes, different times, different requirements, different spaces. Some are, mostly outside, which mitigates, certain challenges. So I guess I'm not really specifically answering that. I'm saying we're open to seeing something like a line item as a nurse in your application and requesting, some support for that. I think if there's any way we can support like sharing of resources, like if there are camps that are nearby and maybe, have a nurse that is on site, at least one of them for the fact, I think we would happily help, encourage and broker those kind of connections and relationships. So I think that's sort of where we land with that. And then Emily is saying, I'm looking at the application currently and can view the board chair signature section, but is there a specific section where board diversity requirements would be entered? I'm going to actually ask Cynthia. I know she may need to go look and come back, but do you know off the top of your head in terms of this application where the board diversity section comes up?
Yeah, you would have to, there's a demographic data sheet there's a little section where you would put in the demographics for each of your board members and your staff. So that's where we would look to answer that.
That's why Cynthia's here, because I forget the really obvious things, the second question. So thank you. Yeah, so that comes up right up at the top. All right, so any other questions, comments?
There was
concerns?
another question in the chat. Michelle was asking if, or actually Sarah, she said, in the past, we've been limited to a request that was the same as the previous year's grant. Is it different this year?
Well, how I will answer this question is we didn't actually set sort of a, an expectation on that. I can tell you that we have $820,000 collectively. Last year we had $820,000. So it's not like our pool is more, it's the same. We are anticipating people to project that they can serve less numbers for the dollars that they get. Basically it's going to cost more for every person because of the types of expenses that exist. So I'm sort of, is it punting? I'm punting that answer down the field. I'm saying that I think as a safe request, is if you have been grant funded by the foundation historically, thinking in terms of what you've been funded before is probably like a likely place to start. If you're thinking you really need to come in for more, then I think you need to really talk to why that is and what that is going to provide for you additionally. I think it's going to depend honestly on how many requests we get, how much they're for, which ones the team, the larger review team says, yes, we want to fund these. I mean, if they want to fund all of them, then we have this challenge. Well, maybe we can't fund all of them at the full amount. So then do we fund all of them at a lesser? I mean, those are sort of all the types of questions that we go through. So I don't want to say anything definitively, but those are sort of the things I would think about as you're considering what to request.
I have a question, Jackie.
Great.
One is that 2 years ago, we had about 85 kids, 85 campers. And this past summer, we had around 30, which was, we just didn't want to see our camp collapse and die.
Right.
And so there's some, it was very, very, very difficult. And we gave handouts at the beginning. We did everything except bribe the parent, to have them come. So it's, I don't imagine it's going to be a whole lot easier, especially when I never even had a nurse. We had first aid there, but we've never employed a nurse. And when I inquired into the fee or the wage that a nurse would get, it was just really exorbitant. And so this seems to be really a challenge this year. And I don't know what we can do. I know that we can't do this coming year what we did last year. And we paid our instructors well because they worked twice as hard to keep the momentum going and to keep the kids excited. The parents were all very thrilled at what we did. And we've never had a summer so full or so rich or so wonderful, but it was hard work. And that virtual thing was difficult, but it was a challenge, but we did it. So I don't, I know that there's another part to this question, which has completely eluded me, but, and I'll ask that if it should come back to mind, but this is a lot. And if we go at just the amount that we got last year, well, I don't know, it's going to be a challenge. That's all.
So Clara, I really hear you. And you just said that normally you had 85 kids and last summer you had 30.
Yes.
So think of asking for the same amount that you asked for 85 kids and project that you're going to serve 30.
Wow.
I mean, what are we going to do? There's only $820,000. You know what I'm saying? Like I would love to tell you all that we had $5 million for summer programs, but we don't, so I'm just, I'm saying you're not going to be penalized for saying you can only serve 30. I know in your heart you want to serve 85, but as you're thinking about it, I am giving you absolute 100% permission, to serve 20 kids really safely, really well, whatever you need to do. And, we're putting this whole thing is almost ridiculous to put this application out there, right now with everything. But
I want to say, Jackie, thank you. Thank you. Your response is freeing. You know what I'm saying? Because we impose a great deal of pressure on ourselves because we want to reach as many kids as we can in the short amount of time that we have. But thank you very much for your response.
And I noticed Susan Dantino in the chat asked about our donor advised funds, and the donor advised funds are separate. That does not preclude this grant at all. So if you have received donor advised funds, you can always receive donor advised funds and this grant as well. They kind of are on parallel tracks.
Thanks. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is Erica. Can you talk some more about donor advised funds? I know Hartford Foundation for Public Giving has been so helpful for us. And I'm new to the grant world. I know we receive donor advised funds, but is there a way, if we have a new exciting program, to put out in front of someone at Hartford Foundation for Public Giving to see if any of the donor advised funds would be interested?
First of all, I want to say thank you, Hillary, and goodbye. She just said she was leaving. So thank you for joining us, and let us know if you have further questions. And then to Erica's question, I am going to bring that back to my colleague in the development department, and see what his thoughts are, because he works a lot with these donor advised funds, and sort of see what is a good potential way to introduce the donors to the opportunities with summer programming. We're also cautious not to overwhelm them, and to be responsive to what their interests are. I think a really exciting start was this idea that we're opening up, that he can pull from the grant applications, basically project descriptions, so that his donors can look at those. I mean, I think that's also
Okay,
like a
that's
really
great.
awesome. That's an awesome start. And because his role, or like there's others too, but this one specific colleague does a lot with donor advised, at the summer, I think thinking of summer type programming, that he does a lot of legwork to go and say, hey, here's options for you, where the donor doesn't feel overwhelmed by lots of phone calls and, all of that kind of stuff. But I will bring it back and say, hey, maybe in the fall, or I don't know, at some point, like, during the year, we should think about maybe if there's a forum of some way, where they, where donors that are interested in summer could come to like a fair, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. I can't promise. I'm not in the development side, so I don't know if there's interest in that, but I can definitely put it out there and then bring back what I learned. Okay. All right. Well, I know we have about 4 minutes left. Does anyone have any other burning questions? All right. I'm going to let Cynthia kind of close this out with just date reminders and contact info. And I just thank you all so much for your passion and your support of the youth in our community.
So just really want to share the application due date is February 3rd. And we are projecting to notify providers by March. So that is moving pretty quickly today. And then we have our information here. If you have specific questions about the funding priorities, you can send Jack. If you have technical questions or, logistical or any issues with templates, you can email me. My email's down below. And then in regards to the login, you can email grant administration. So I look forward to all of your applications. And if you have any questions, both Jackie and I are available. So please feel free to email us with any questions. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you for joining us.